Hello, everybody. Alrighty then. So, hopefully, everybody's having had a good weekend this weekend. Um, we got into some interesting conversations last night on the panel show, the weekend edition. Of course, it looks like over the weekend here, quite a bit's been going on in each news. Well, into some of that today and over the next couple of days here. As I've mentioned a few times over the weekend, we're changing things up a little bit. Where starting this week, we're actually going to be we're going to probably start using bleeding full a little bit more, as opposed to CBR. Just CBR went through some formatting changes that I just don't care for. So um, we're going to go ahead and use use bleeding full to supplement what we do on pounding in the comment. Let me just take care of this real quick. Alrighty then. So, we're gonna give it a few minutes, give people a chance to get in here as we are of course are just waiting on some people to show up, give them a chance to get in here before we get started. Let's see what else. What else can I talk about here? So yeah, before we of course start going over what we're going to all right, just give me one moment. I'm going to turn on some music here, take care of something real quick while here for a moment. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back now. So hopefully, we're just okay. So now coming up on 4 minutes. I guess it would be a good time kind of go over what we're going to be going over tonight. Let me just take care of something here real quick. All right, so with that now that we got all that taken care of there, so we're about to just go over what's on tap for tonight. Is what we're going to be we've got a few little things here. Once again, the SJWs are going after the Japanese. This time they're going after Final Fantasy 16's director Yoshi-P for apparently lack of diversity in one of his games. We got some. Apparently, we got a little bit more news coming out of Seth Rogen's interpretation of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, some gender swaps going on. There's a new Animal Man series coming out that we'll be looking at, and Chuck Dixon is set to pen the latest Conan the Barbarian novel. So, quite a bit to talk about tonight and go over. So, let me see now. So, let's go ahead and get everything going here. As we shall venture forth here. Back, forth, everyone in. All right, so here we go. We're going to get started here with this first article here. All right, so No Game, No Life creator fires back after Western reader criticizes series lack of dark-skinned characters. Nerdigans Inc. The article is by Nerdigans Inc. published back last Thursday, the 9th, in the anime censorship manga section. But once again, they're getting upset because there wasn't enough. Apparently, somebody got this guy's game. Let's see what's going on here. Hot off the heels of Final Fantasy 15 director Yoshi-P facing criticism for his upcoming game's lack of medieval European diversity, No Game, No Life creator Yu Kamiya, Yu Kamiya has found himself in a similar situation. So basically, two different creators here. But anyway, two different people here. But anyways, and like the esteemed Square Enix producer, he's not backing down from his creative's decisions. Okay. The comedic light novel series, No Game, No Life, follows the exploits of the NEET siblings Sora and Shira. And for those who don't know what a NEET is, in this case, a NEET is somebody who is not in Japanese culture. They're usually teenagers to young adults who are not in education, employment, or training. That's what the term NEET stands for. It's an acronym. A pair of shut-ins who, under the shared gamer tag blank, in smaller quotes there, absolutely dominate every single video game they play. One day, the two are challenged to an online game of chess by an individual calling himself a god. After being quickly toppled by the siblings, the god, otherwise known as Tet, isekais them into the magical world of Disboard, where every dispute, no matter how large, is settled by games. For those of you who don't know the term isekai, but we of course talked about it quite a bit here, that's the idea of being transported to a fantasy world and playing, isekais over the last few years here, last 2, 3, 4, 5 years here, have become real popular. Even becoming more popular than harem animes. Anyways, his reason, question, to allow them to challenge him for the title of the, in smaller quote, God of Games, unsmaller quote. Yet, despite the game taking place in a fully fictional country, a Western reader unsurprisingly took issue with the fact that Disboard did not exactly parallel real world history. Well, of course it didn't. It's a fully fiction. Okay, I'll read this. Yet, despite the game taking place in a fully fictional country, fully fictional country, fully fictional country. Ah, of course, it's not going to parallel real world history, you dolt, because it's not based in the real world. It's a complete fantasy world. And and here's something to think about. Here's something else to think about too. Okay, even though they generally look Caucasian to us, okay, doesn't necessarily mean these drawings are Caucasian. You know, again, it's never really stated if, I mean, even in most anime, even though many animes take place in Japan, the settings usually in Japan or some fictional world, they don't even draw it to, if you're gonna sit there and get nitpicky about, things like skin tone and stuff like that, they don't exactly, they look more Caucasian than really Japanese. I would say one of the few examples I do know of where they have actually depicted, drawn somebody like to look like they are legitimately Japanese is Brock from Pokemon. But aside from that, they generally do look. The only things they usually will do is they may adjust the hairstyle or coloring of the hair to depict them as being Japanese over, but they don't sit there and focus so much on skin tone. But anyways, on March 2nd, which of course would have been 11 days ago today, Kamiya took to Twitter to reveal that they had recently received a scolding DM from a forum reader who said, quote, "There were brown-skinned people in medieval and early modern Europe. Why don't they appear in your work? Maybe because it's not a huge thing within the story." I don't, that I would think that most people when they read manga or they read comics or they watch anime or cartoons, they're not necessarily it's only these twits right here that seem to be thinking about, oh, are there any black people, or are the Asians actually looking Asian, or anything like that. It's like, you know, it's not. It may, whatever the skin tone the characters are really doesn't matter. You know, and then here's something else to take into consideration too. It's also possible because medieval Europe, that also had, here's a twist for you. Let's just say for a moment he was to depict people of darker skin in Europe. Okay. Now, considering what medieval times were, there were people both. There were darker skinned and lighter skinned people who were serfdoms and slaves in Europe as well. During that time period, and if he had decided to depict that, then these people would be all over that. Oh, you're not depicting dark skinned people the right way. You're depicting them as slaves. You're racist. You're this. You're that. You know, it's like, really, dude. Now, granted, that's just what I would guess. If they did actually, because what you have to remember is that this guy's trying to quote unquote go for diversity, and you have to remember too that darker skinned people were also likely more, slaves in certain areas of Europe as well. You know, now if he means like those who live in the Mediterranean, like in southern parts of Italy, Greece, some of that area where, yeah, they're closer to the beaches, closer to the sea, and maybe they are, maybe they could be a bit darker, but that's not really pertinent to the story in most cases. It really isn't. So let's see how let's see how he responds here. Um, and as always, guys, if you haven't already, if you can like and share the stream, just so we get some more friendly people in here. Also, if anything here happens to catch your attention, feel free to comment and/or ask questions, and I will do the best I can to answer those questions. So, responding directly to this accusation, the Brazilian Japanese creator. So this guy's Brazilian. This guy is part Brazilian, part Japanese, kind of like Chad and Bleach, who's half Mexican, half Japanese. Declared, "quote First of all, this board is not in Europe." Okay, that's quote. Were there furry ears or elves in medieval Europe? Good point there. Good point. Now, granted, oftentimes when you do have when you do have anthropomorphic characters, or you have elves, dwarves, that those characters usually are set in a quote unquote medieval setting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's medieval Europe. Now, granted, some of these legends have come out of Europe, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the setting is in Europe. He makes a good point there. He added before noting, quote, also there are usually brown skinned characters, unquote. Um, and then we get one here. It's a little darker sound. It should be noted that one of the 16 different sentient races who have a seat at the table of disboard politics are the dwarves, all of whom are noticeably more tan than their peers. All right, yeah, that's okay. And I think we see that up here. In fact, I can give you another example of a medieval style anime that illustrates that as well. Record of Lotus War. If you've ever seen Record of Lotus War or Record of Lotus War Chronicles of a Heroic Knight, they have a couple dwarf characters in there where they're darker skinned. There's Gim in the Record of Lotus War OVA, and then there's Grievous, the priest of the war god, in Chronicles of Record of Lotus War Chronicles of Heroic Knight. So and I do think in general dwarves are usually colored a little bit more darker than other beings, whereas elves, for example, tend to be lighter in tone. You know, goblins are pretty dark skinned. Give another example there. So, anyways, it should be okay. Okay, dwarves. All of okay. We read that part. However, as they did not appear in the series anime adaptation, nor have they made their debut in its manga version, it seems that this fan had not fully engaged with Kamiya's work before attempting to rake him over the coals. Yeah, it sounds like this guy is criticizing Kamiya here as a real charmer. Ultimately, the entire interaction left Kamiya wondering if they would have a better understanding of the fans' mentality if, instead of leaving for Japan with his parents at the age. Okay, let me see. Ultimately, the entire interaction left Kamiya wondering if they would have a better understanding of the fans' mentality if, instead of leaving for Japan with his parents at the age of 7, he had lived out his life in the United States. Quote, I wonder if I wouldn't understand it because I am now completely close to the Japanese. Said, let me tell you something, my friend. I know you're. Granted, you're probably not ever going to see this, but just in case you do, let me say this: there are those of us in the United States who find the behavior of these type of people perplexing. Okay, there are people here in the United States who don't get their behavior either. So don't feel bad if you don't understand this guy. Okay, we many of us believe that people like this, the guy who's criticizing you, should probably be straitjacketed and locked up in an asylum somewhere. Okay, so don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. Don't feel bad if you don't understand this guy. Right, and there we go with that one. Well, that was actually a quick article. Wow, that one went by quickly here. Things are starting to dim a little. Oh, why did I do that? I wasn't trying to do that. I shouldn't have done that because. Come on. Let me get back down to where we were. All right, so here's as things are. Well, let's see. Things are getting a little bit dimmer at the moment here where I'm at. I'm gonna go off camera here for a quick moment to turn on the light in my room. Yeah, do it now as opposed to waiting more minutes when it's a little darker. Might as well just turn light on now because we know it's gonna get dark soon here. I have to do it sooner or later, so I might as well just do it now. And I will be right back. All right. So after basically seeing that maybe the light wasn't necessary yet, I decided not to keep it on after all. Just wait a few more minutes. But anyways, let's get ready to get on to this next article here, as we and of course some more stuff coming out of Seth Rogen's mind and his interpretation of Teenage Mutant. So of course we were talking about the race swapped, you know, body positive April, race swap body positive April last week. Well, Seth Rogen just can't stop trying to one up himself in terms of just pushing woke. Seth Rogen's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem to gender swap Leatherhead and Wingnut. Article by Spencer McCulley, published back on March 9, 2023. Alright, so most fans' attentions were understandably more focused on producer Seth Rogen's decision to subject April O'Neil to her second such race swap in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. It seems two more members of the Turtles cast have likewise received a, in smaller quotes, modern update. These changes, revealed in a series of promotional images released alongside the trailer, which did announce the actors' participation but did not specify their roles. It appears that Wingnut and Leatherhead will have their genders swapped in their silver screen debuts. Per said images, the franchise's resident Batman parody will be portrayed by actress Natasha Demetrio, one of the stars of the television version of What We Do in the Shadows. I guess Wingnut, who is the turtle version of Batman, I guess they're saying. While fan favorite Crocodile Mutant will be brought to life by Peter Rabbit and X-Men first class star Rose Byrne. I'm sorry, but having a female play a character named Leatherhead just doesn't seem right to me. I don't know anybody else feels that way, but yeah, Leatherhead doesn't strike me as a name any female would actually go for. It would be something that it's obviously something more of a guy's name, but Seth Rogen is dude probably needs some serious help. I mean, tell me something, people. Let me ask you this. How many of you would know of a female who would sit there and go by the name Leatherhead? I don't think that's that great a descriptor that if not all, most females would find all that pleasant. I don't know. I mean, I could ask some women I know, but I don't know. As noted above, these casting decisions, under the presumption that, like both this film and Across the Spider-Verse, respective characters must share their superficial traits with their voice actors, will result in the two characters being presented as women rather than their originally intended male forms. First, briefly introduced, the Peter Laird produced comic series included with American food producer Ralston Purina's 1989 serial. Wingnut makes his first proper appearance in the 123rd episode of the 1987 animated series Zack and the Alien Invaders. Who was voiced back then by Rob Paulsen. This of course was the series that many of us in like my generation had grown up on, right? Therein, the bat-like creature is depicted as an alien invader intent on taking over planet Earth. His plan to turn the children of Earth into mindless zombies, ultimately stopped by the Turtles. The franchise's expanded universe later sees Wingnut become one of their staunchest allies. Conversely, though, Wingnut is a rather minor character in the whole Teenage Mutant Ninja lore. Leatherhead is one of the series' most recognizable and beloved characters. So there's a scene from the '87 version with Leatherhead, the Turtles, and April O'Neil right there. Now, things are getting even darker now, so I'm gonna have to check something here, but I will put some music on while I tend to some things here real quick. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Let me get back to this article here. Let's see. Rising from the sewers in the 6th issue of Ryan Brown and Jim Lawson's Kanan 1988 series Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, itself launched by Mirage Studios to specifically introduce characters and expand the Turtles support cast, Leatherhead began life as a baby alligator in the Florida Everglades. However, after coming into contact with the series' signature mutagen, Leatherhead found himself not only sporting a new humanoid form, but also an equivalent intelligence. In the aftermath of his change, Leatherhead finds himself regularly running into the Turtles, sometimes as their enemy, a role he most notably fulfilled in the 1987 cartoon, but mostly as their ally. And of course, as is particularly obvious given his constantly shirtless appearance, Leatherhead was originally created as a male character. Yeah, and there's another thing right there. How are they going to do that? I mean, if they're going to gender swap, if you're going to have this, if you're not going to gender swap Leatherhead, are you going to still have him, shirtless? That mean that if you're trying to make this a PG or a rate G or PG movie, having a female character running around topless is probably not going to fly too well with the censors. My guess, though, is they'll probably do like they did with Gila in the Spider-Man episode involving the lizard. Put a shirt on her or whatever. But that's just, again, my guess. Let's just see how things go from there here. In a brief aside, these character alterations, April included, come as particularly hilarious, as while Rogan clearly made them in the name of, smaller quote, representation, his own role in the film as Bebop actually whitewashes an originally black character. As shown during his pop culture debut in the 1987 cartoon's very first episode, prior to being exposed to Shredder's machinations, Bebop was an outright black man. Ah! Well, isn't that interesting? So Seth Rogen's playing a character who was originally, and we've been talking a little bit about this too, how they're saying, oh, representation. And here Seth Rogen is voicing a character who was originally a black person. What, are they gonna race swap Bebop too? To fit Rogen's headcanon? Oh boy, the leaps in logic and the hypocrisy abound. Oh boy. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem grinds into theaters on August 4th, 2023. Yeah, Seth Rogen is some guy, isn't he? Yeah, he race swapped April O'Neil. He race swapped and made her into a body positive character. He's gender swapping Wingnut and Leatherhead. And again, I made this point at the very beginning of this, when we were at the beginning of this article. I don't really know of any woman who would find Leatherhead a very pleasant moniker to be going by. A very pleasant or complimentary moniker to be going by. No, that's just my thing. And then of course he's maybe on a lesser level, kind of race swapping Bebop by voicing him. So yeah, Rogan, you're kind of got a screw loose there, buddy. That's all we can say. Yeah. So, anyways, getting ready to move. Oh wait, almost made that mistake again. Don't need to unshare it just because. Um, all right, let me just do something real quick here. Here when they do that. Under RJ. That's, oh, yeah, he's already done with that. Okay. All right. Well, anyways, we now get back to. Hello? I'm just double checking. Just double checking the YouTube real quick. So, let's get back to articles here. Gonna get on to the next article here. Hmm. All right, so we're 40 minutes into the show now. Animal Man series rumored to be in development for James Gunn's DCU. Uh, article by J.B. Augustine published this past Friday. So go ahead and take a look at this. One of the quirkiest characters of DC's Vertigo line could be headed to HBO Max or Netflix in a series that ties in with the DCU. Rumor has it that Animal Man, one of comics' mystical avatars, has a show in development, and though this isn't fully confirmed, there is a growing buzz. This begins with our source and his background. Yeah. From what I understand, the way that Animal Man is now depicted, it's almost like he's the animal. He's kind of the animal specific version, of Captain Planet in a way. Yeah, I think he has the ability to call on the abilities of much like Vixen through her little totem on her neck. But yeah. So let's go ahead and get into this. So YouTube live streamer and noted scooper Sil Abdul reported the rumor in an exclusive where he said, um, quote, a little birdie, unquote, told him James Gunn is looking to adapt as many D-list characters as possible. Animal Man being one. Quote, this is as obscure as you get, unquote, Abdul says. Quote, and Pierre James Gunn, unquote, that's to say we are seeing an extra veering from Zack Snyder. Abdul invited Gigosity editor-in-chief and fellow scooper Mikey Sutton on to expound on the character, one he is a big fan of. Abdul brought up Gunn's, quote, infatuation with Grant Morrison. I do believe Morrison was the guy who created Animal Man, if I understand correctly, which segued into Sutton sharing a screenshot of Animal Man issue number 26's cover. The EIC then offered a light, editor-in-chief, I guess, offered a light spoiler of the story within that comic. Anyways. Anyways, let's check that real quick here. All right, getting back to the article here. Huh. While Morrison didn't create Animal Man, okay, he brought the character into new territory. Yeah, that's right. He didn't, because Animal Man even predates Morrison by the Animal Man originally, I think, came about back in the late 60s, early 70s, I believe, as I recall. I think about it. Morrison wasn't around until the late 80s, so. In the new territory with his well known run that got quite meta. Morrison frequently broke the fourth wall, just as Marvel did with She-Hulk and Deadpool. And in issue number 26, he inserted himself into the narrative. Anointed a god on the page, Morrison was revealed as the cause of Animal Man's tragic life. Boy. Isn't that quite fun? Sutton calls the book very quirky and it suggested Gunn could lean into the meta elements Deadpool style. Due to that, he's excited Gunn is greenlighting the series, but he doesn't want the filmmaker turned mogul to write it or direct it as he did with Peacemaker and Suicide Squad. He will also be more hands on with Superman Legacy. Recently, Gunn gave a serious indication he has it in mind to expand the Vertigo universe. Within the DCU, the two aren't far apart to begin with. As he noted on Twitter, quote, Swamp Thing was in Vertigo comics, but he was really a DC character. We're dealing with a couple potential things with Vertigo comics that I really adored, unquote, he said. Here's some of the Sandman lore, it looks like. All right, so there we go with that. These articles are going pretty quickly tonight. I may just barely get up to an hour with this, but and anyways, let's see where we end up after we, of course. We do have one more article we're going to, of course, be going over. Right there. Might have more to say on that one. Let's see now. All right, so let's get into this then. Chuck Dixon pens new Conan the Barbarian novel, The Siege of the Black Citadel, in Robert E. Howard's bravura writing style. Article by John F. Trent, published this past Friday, book section. So here we go. Chuck Dixon is primarily known as a prolific comic book creator, known for his iconic runs on Batman, Punisher, Tim Drake, and Birds of Prey. However, he's also a novelist with his six-book time traveling extravaganza series, Bad Times, as well as his 11-book vigilante justice series, 11Cade. Now, Dixon is dipping his toes in Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian. Dixon is no stranger to Conan, having written multiple tales about the Cimmerian in the Savage Sword of Conan comic book series, and now he's plying his trade with the savage mercenary in a novel titled The Siege of the Black Citadel. The novel sees Conan joining the forces of Prince Zathometus as he wages war against his cousin and the Mad Emperor Strabonus. The campaign has gone well for Zathmodius, but Strabonus still holds out within the Black Citadel or Talaskrith. With winter encroaching, Zathmodius fears his siege might be compromised, and he tasked Conan, along with a number of other sellswords, to find a way into the fort. Sellswords, that's another interesting name for a mercenary. Sellsword. I mean, yes, you do sell your skills as a swordsman, I guess, to the highest bidder to help. I guess that's why, Conan's considered a mercenary. He offers his skills as a warrior and a swordsman to the highest bidder. So I guess you could call him a sellsword, as it were. Conan quickly finds out that the fortress, quote, is guarded by things more terrible than walls and swords, unquote. Speaking with Bounding into Comics, Dixon explained why he wanted to write the story. Quote, I wanted to write a straight up war story of Conan's time as a mercenary, but I also wanted to throw in a Lovecraftian monster as well as a depiction of dark sorcery in the Hyperborean age and all its dire consequences. Unquote. Dixon also relished the challenge to write in what he describes as Howard's bravura style. Quote, I was totally immersed in Howard's bravura writing style as an adolescent. I liked the challenge of creating a new Conan story written in that style. Unquote. He added, quote, so much of Howard's prose relied on the reader to create vivid images in their own imaginations. As they read, I really wanted to see if I could inspire the same brand of wild visuals. Emerald Lust. That's an I guess that's one of the names of one of his co-stars, maybe? Maybe one of the female warriors in there. Emerald Lust. That's a very interesting name. Wouldn't mind meeting a girl like that, right? Emerald Lust. How about you guys? We did get somebody. I do thank whoever dropped in to drop a like. That was I appreciate that. I can share. Hopefully, we can get to more people. All right. Anyways, getting back to the article here. Let's see. The Siege of the Black Citadel is the first in what will be a series of novels from Dixon about Robert E. Howard's Conan. A preview of the novel can be read on archaven.com. The novel can also be purchased for $12.99 through archaven.com. It will be available to purchase on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers by the end of March. Do you plan on checking out The Siege of the Black Citadel? It does sound like an interesting comic. So anyway, so that's all I was going to cover from Bounding into Con. Let's see where we're at on time here. Yeah, we're just barely coming. We're at like 55 minutes. So I'm gonna go over, as I said, I'm gonna go over to Bleeding Fool here. Let's see what we can find there to talk about. First, I will, of course, head over into their comic and book section here. Let me go back to home here. Wait a second. Wait, I'll go back to this right here. Comics and books. March 13th. March 13th. Let's see. There's a couple of stories here. Let's see. Busiek and Simone suddenly complain about decades-old problem in comics. All right, let's take a look at this. Take a look at this article right here from Bleeding Fool. Because obviously one of those names, Simone, I'm guessing it's Gail Simone. All right, so Busiek and Simone suddenly complain about decades-old problem in comics. Article by Avi Green, published March 13th, which is of course today. So they're the two characters. That's I think Gail Simone, as I understand it. All right, so let's take a look at this. Who would have thought people who did little to mend an ailing situation 2 decades before would actually be complaining now about a dearth of civilian cast members in modern superhero fare. But that's what both Kurt Busiek and Gail Simone have done in the following tweets. So here's a tweet from Kurt Busiek, I guess in reply to Gail Simone here. So Gail Simone saying, okay, here's a theory, has some holes in it, but here we go. One of my biggest complaints about modern superhero stories, especially from some newer writers, that they have downplayed the role of non-powered, relatable background characters. Kurt Busiek, in response, this is all very true, and I've been known to gripe about it many, many times over the years. Well, let's see what these people have to say. And then this guy, John Stout, replied to him, a bunch of Astro City stories hit as hard as they do specifically because they're narrated from the perspective of bystanders, don't they? All right, so that's some of the tweets that they were noting there. Well, in that case, how come he continued to quote unquote go with the flow and had no issues with getting rid of one of the most significant civilian co-stars in comicdom, Mary Jane Watson from Spider-Man's main cast? Point. Many of the writers and artists who may be complaining about mainstream decadence now did almost nothing to turn around a dire situation even then. Here's another post. And there's a post from Raider Lee. Replying, yeah, I would say Marvels, but I'd say Marvels by some fine gentleman shows how he might see superheroes in real life through the eye of a photojournalist, Phil Sheldon. Yeah, but as noted, else thread, um, that's not about a supporting cast, which is what Gail's talking about. Anyways, and maybe that's the problem. Busiek conceived some special guest characters, but did he make a serious effort in the 90s to develop civilian co stars or recurring cast members that could have a long ranging impact? Not from what I can recall, and he certainly didn't complain, as Chuck Dixon may have if Marvel DC got rid of characters he'd worked hard to create. That said, if memory serves, the characters Dixon spoke of losing to bad editorial mandates were villains seen in Nightwing, which isn't exactly the same thing, and it's worse if the editors banish honest and law abiding characters than crooked ones, or easily worse, turn the goodies into baddies in the worst ways. Hmm. I'm going to reread all the posts here about it. To me, the posts don't seem to make much sense. Yeah, bounding, bleeding full here gives a lot of references here too. They do have a lot of notations here with some of these tweets. Noticing he mentions Harry Osborn, one must wonder what he thought of One More Day's illogically bringing Harry back to the living world after he'd originally been portrayed dying in 1993. More recently, One More Day (OMD) was retconned away as yet another Android clone idea, and even then, it was all spoiled by coming at Harry's expense. Unparentheses. Even as Gwen Stacy of Earth 616 continued to rot in the grave, even before that, when J. Michael Straczynski was writing Spider-Man, he made very little use of Spidey's supporting cast, if at all, save for Mary Jane and Aunt May. And that's but one example of how, since the turn of the century, mainstream superheroes comics were becoming increasingly mediocre. Some interesting things here. Yet he dislikes Mary Jane, a character whom Stan Lee drew ideas for from his own wife Joan's career as a model. Now, to remind everybody, Joan Lee, of course, not only was she the wife of Stan Lee, not only was she a model, but she also did lend her voice in Spider-Man the animated series of the '90s as Madam Web. If some of you remember that character, that was Stan's wife, Joan. Hence, at the very end of the series, there when Spidey goes, "Yeah, Stan Lee's a real great guy," and Madam Web replies, "Oh, don't I know it?" So. Um, and I recall reading a sequel to Marvel's from the late 2000s where any appearance by Mary Jane was muted at worst. Busiek stopped the story in 1987 at a point that could be considered prior to Peter Parker and MJ's marriage, and it was in this story where Phil Sheldon passed away. So Busiek apparently so disliked having Spidey in a marriage, he didn't want to explore any further potential in a nostalgia-based tale, and that's one of the most disappointing things about Busiek's approach. Mainly that he'd rail against a fictional character instead of how she was written or anything. Yeah, that doesn't really sound like it makes much sense, does it? It really doesn't sound like it makes much sense. Of course not. I guess that was in. I guess we should be reading the tweets too, because I guess a lot of what is being based on here. So what he said here, Marcel Fonder pointed out, as part of the power level creep problem, heroes are too far removed from a normal human. Of course, so are the enemies. Your non-powered human can't do much or even justify their presence there. Busiek responds to him, non-powered humans don't have to be part of battle scenes to be part of the stories. Of course not. I guess that's what people would find everybody of. But again, Busiek must think Mary Jane Watson doesn't have to be in a marriage with Peter Parker. And if I recall correctly, IIRC, he's not in favor of the Superman Lois Lane marriage either. So why is he lecturing us when he leaves out significant characters? All right. Here's some extra from Gail Simone. Now, is Gail Simone, I guess, replying here from maybe about a week ago. Part of it seems to be from a Spanish reaction, Spanish having no negative connotation here, or at least that's what she'd probably like you to think, anyways. That focusing on subplot characters leaves less room for action and drama, like a kid who fast forwards to fights in a martial arts movie. But I see a lot in pitches and submission from new writers and aspiring writers, artists too. Every pitch is Captain America fights Namor, and that is the entire story. But does it keep long term interest? Well, she may have a point there. But this is but one thing that led to the watering down of the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew adventures since 1959. Besides the PC involved, politically correct, I guess. They apparently thought too much character drama undermined the more action-oriented sequences. Let me see what that term means again. If I recall, I actually center by. Let's see, but if I recall correctly, when Simone was writing Birds of Prey, she did little to develop any new supporting civilian characters, if at all. So what's her point? Any more than Busiek's. If she didn't make a serious effort as a writer to bring more to the. All right, I think I understand what's going on here. What the writer's point. Writer seems Avi here seems to be pointing out the hypocrisy of these comic book writers because they're complaining now about the lack of development of supporting characters in comics, albeit they never seem to do much to help the problem by building up those characters. I think that's what Avi is getting at here. Let's see. We had on time here. 109. Okay. Depending on how fast we get through this, I might be able to do the other story there. Let's see now. All right, so here's, I guess, some more follow up to what was just said there. If a book is just Spider Man versus Carnage and that's it, how long does that keep a reader's attention? We know Spider Man isn't going to die, he is unlikely to lose. The stakes need to come from somewhere. For decades, much of the drama of Superman came from the cast of the Daily Planet. Spider Man and his most devoted following, when Aunt May and MJ and Harry were prominent, it gave context. It gave a reason for Spider-Man to care. Well, if you understand Spider-Man's backstory too, you know that a lot of what drives him is the saying, "With great power comes great responsibility." Because going back to early in his days as Spider-Man, when he allowed a criminal to get away, and because of that, his uncle Ben got murdered. in a robbery attempt. But if she made no effort to pan Joe Quesada for dissolving the spider marriage and alienating the audience, what's the use of stressing this? Yeah, I think as I said, the writer or the writer of the article here seems to be pointing out some of the hypocrisy going on here. That's what it looks like to me. Here's Gail Simone's response, I guess, to that. Comics aren't cheap. There's a lot of pressure to put something on the cover and solicits, that is, crowd pleasing and taste change. But think of the first Donner Superman, the Raimi Spider-Man movies, the romance, the risk, the drama comes from normal people. And I feel like the movie universes are following the same pattern, moving towards movies with fewer and fewer relatable non-combatant characters. Let's see. And then Gail Simone said here, I enjoyed Quantumania, but the cheery, fun-to-watch friends of Scott are removed entirely, not even mentioned. Michael Douglas and Michelle Pfeiffer move from interesting background characters to middle of the action players, and the daughter as well. Everybody else is a toy. It's okay. Let's see. Spider-Man becomes intrinsically hooked to Iron Man, replacing a lot of Uncle Ben's role. Where are the normal people reacting in ways that we would react if our neighbor or friend became the Crimson Fork or whatever? Oh boy, she's being a little sardonic there. Oh, she's upholding the Ant-Man sequel at the movies, a movie that's riddled with wokeness. Sorry to say, but that's doing little to improve a dire situation, since the way the movie's written stems from the kind of mindset that led to less co-stars. So this backhanded statement only dampens her argument. If everyone in the movie is extraordinary, it becomes ordinary. Someone needs to be able to say, quote, holy crap, the dude is flying. Yeah. Well, some of the points may be made, but I think the part of the problem is that if her whole point is that maybe some of these civilian characters should be more developed, why didn't she do it before? I think that's what the writer of the article is getting at. It gets a little muddy, and there's less feeling of wonder. Speaking of wonder, that movie did it right. It had Etta and Steve, the soldiers, and others, and it made Wonder Woman look like a miracle. Take that away, it'd be a far lesser movie. This reminds me of a recent Flash storyline where Linda Park West suddenly developed speed power of her own, not to mention Moira McTaggart in the X-Men retcon into a mutant herself, which again makes the creations into more of a mockery when they're changed into full-fledged superdoers themselves. They don't have to be turned into superhumans in order to take part in a battle, and canonizing the powers they now have is lazy. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does seem kind of. It seems, at least from what I'm reading here, it seems lazy and short-sighted. Yeah, I mean, if you want to try to, spice up a story, just give the normal people superpowers and spice it up that way. Yeah, that does seem a little short-sighted lazy there. Gail Simone, can you? Okay, saw that part. So 12 here. I do feel like fatigue might set in. For a while. Every few months was some huge game changing event in superhero comics, and I love those stories, but overuse does bring fatigue. Well, yeah, it does seem like I know RJ's talked about a lot this, particularly in the DC universe, where they just seem to, oh, they just figure, okay, we're going to reboot the whole universe every 5 years just to try to pick up more steam. I mean, after a while, that does get a little too redundant. Gee, this gives her whole argument a backhanded feel when those quote unquote game changing stories she says she loves were a huge part of the problem. Mhm. Oh, wow. I didn't even know this. Wow. I'm looking at this. The reason I'm going wow here is because I didn't know this came. I didn't know this came from. Didn't know that actually came from the comic. I remember when Mary Jane was introduced in the. I remember when Mary Jane was introduced in the Spider-Man the Animated Series cartoon by Aunt May. Now here they would be indicating that Peter was introduced to her by actually Anna Watson, her aunt. In the cartoon, it was Mary Jane or Aunt May who introduced Peter to Mary Jane. I remember those very lines being delivered, of course, by Sarah Ballesteros. Um, face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot. I remember that. I didn't know. Of course, since I don't read Marvel as much, because I haven't ever read the Marvel comics until, of course, recently. Until I started reading, doing the historical comic retrospect, I didn't know that came in the comics. I remember though her saying that in the animated series in the '90s. So that's kind of cool to see. Anyways, I also noticed another writer named Patrick Gerard respond with the following. Um, so Russ Burlingame here, pointing out to Dan Jurgens and Gail Simone, she ends her thread with quote unquote, "Am I wrong? But I know for a fact you and I have had a variation of this conversation at least 5 times." Patrick Gerard responds, "I think, as I said elsewhere in this thread, that there can be a tendency to quote unquote elevate background characters into heroes, villains. It's a trick that works sometimes, but can be overplayed. If heroes aren't regularly interacting with normal people, the magic gets lost." Yep, that's true. And he makes a good point there because it reminds, granted, I know we're talking more about comics here, but going back to Spider-Man, the animated series for a moment, as we're talking about all this, it reminds me of the episode Make a Wish from um, from one of the seasons where Madam Web, as she is kind of taking Peter under her wing, as it were, to prepare him for the Spidey Wars, um, for the Secret Wars and then the Spidey Wars. I remember one of the things she was trying to get him to do is have the faith of a child. And of course, they did have a thing where the character Maria Elizondo, or I don't remember, Maria Tiana Elizondo, I believe, was their full name, but but you know, Madam Web had encouraged Spider-Man to interact with her, and that was magic because that's what kind of, I guess, built his heart back up, as it were. Helped him to find a reason to care again, and things seemed lost. So, anyways, getting back into the article here. And even when they are these days, the trouble is that it's all kept very superficial and severely limited to just a few tropes, skin color and LGBT ideology. No serious effort is made to emphasize civilian co-stars and guests with Ukrainian ancestry. For example, in parentheses here, so it's mystifying why some of the aforementioned writers are making use of Ukraine's flag symbols in their profiles. Mainstream publications are particularly damaged as a result of this PC approach to storytelling, which is true. And we've been seeing this for the last 3 to 5 years here. We've constantly talked about that. See, it's one thing for a professional writer artist to complain about what's going wrong with superhero comics. But if they did nothing to mend the situation at a time, it might have counted. They're just as responsible for the downfall of the medium. Okay, so there we go. That they make a good point there. So with that, we're down to 122, so probably is about good time to start moving along here. So now that we went through that story, of course, we're going to go ahead and we're going to move on to the wrestling wrap up here. Is we do have a lot of wrestling stuff to go over as well. Namely, of course, so first off, some WWE news, of course, as they continue to move to prepare for this year's WrestleMania come April 1st. Second WrestleMania weekend will be, of course, starting on Friday, March 31st, and going through Sunday. The WrestleMania event itself will be April 1st and 2nd, Saturday and Sunday, with the Hall of Fame ceremony being held on Friday. The first two inductees into this year's class of the WWE Hall of Fame have already been announced as Rey Mysterio. It's been announced that Rey Mysterio Jr. and Great Muta will be inducted this year. Now, Great Muta never was technically a part of the WWE. He did have, I think, some matches in the early 90s with Hogan during some co-production shows, I think, with some of the Japanese companies. And, of course, we do know that Hogan did some work for New Japan as well back before he even went to, back before his second run with the WWE where he became champion. Now, Hogan's had, I think, like 3 or 4 different runs in the WWE, believe it or not. His first, many people might think that Hogan's first run in the WWE was Hulkamania. That was not. That was actually his second run. He actually was in the WWE in 1980 for a few months under the management of Classy Freddie Blassie as a heel. So, but anyway, so the first 2 inductees were announced: Rey Mysterio Jr. and Great Muta. Now WWE has inducted people like Abdul the Butcher comes to mind, who have not had connections to or too strong a connection with WWE, but have been put into their Hall of Fame for their overall contributions. Muta being an example of one here, as well as Abdul the Butcher. Now Rey Mysterio Jr., he's being inducted by his longtime friend Conan. So that will be very. Now Conan also had a brief history with the WWE. Of course, he came into the WWE as the Max Moon character back in the '90s. So didn't have as long a stint as some of his compatriots at the time, including Ray and the late Eddie Guerrero. But and another interesting little side story from the WWE. Apparently now the SJWs are going after one of the WWE superstars, as Ridge Holland of the Brawling Brutes faction has apparently been receiving death threats from fans due to what happened last year to Big E. Now, Ridge Holland was the one who ended up breaking Big E's neck in a botch where he, I think, belly to bellied him and Bailey and drew him drew Big E onto his own neck, causing it to be broken. Now Big E is making a recovery. Whether or not, it's still up in the air whether or not he'll be coming back, getting into the ring, but a lot of it says he is recovering. So we all hope for the best there. And of course, as we talked about before, WrestleMania is coming up the first week, April 1st and 2nd. And we've already been talking about, of course. So let me just give you the updated card here on that. So let's take a look at the updated card. Oh, and one of the others. Well, I'll get back to that in a moment. But before we, all right. So another story has been going on is there's been a little scuttlebutt involving Bray Wyatt as well as as and apparently Bray Wyatt has had to miss a few house shows. Now they're reporting that he's missed those house shows due more to a physical issue. I think he busted his finger, and that's why he's missed these shows. But there's been some speculation that he may have walked out due to creative differences, but that's been disputed. These, of course, are just rumors. Now, Bray Wyatt, of course, he's scheduled to face off against Bobby Lashley at this year's WrestleMania. So on night one of WrestleMania here on Saturday, April the 1st, that's far what's been signed, of course. Cody Rhodes will be challenging for both the WWE and WWE Universal and the WWE title on night one. Both women's titles are said to be on the line as Charlotte Flair defends the SmackDown Women's title against Judgment Day's Rhea Ripley. Bianca Belair will be defending the Raw Women's title against Asuka. Austin Theory will be defending the United States title against John Cena. John Cena will be making a rare appearance back in WWE. We may be seeing him on Raw over the next few weeks, help promote the show and promote the match. Brock Lesnar is set to take on Omos, who will have MVP in his corner. The women's tag team champions, Becky Lynch and Lita, will be teaming with Trish Stratus to take on Damage Control of Bayley, Dakota Kai, and Io Sky. Seth Rollins is set to take on Logan Paul. That's all supposedly slated for night one. Let me just see about night two. See if they have any. No, they don't have any matches up. There is some talk that the women's tag team championships might be put on the line on night 2. Still some of that going around there. So that's all of what's going on there. Moving on to some AEW news. Let's see. So, of course, this Wednesday's Dynamite. Because right now the focus, of course, has been mostly on the Ring of Honor, Supercard of Honor coming up on the 31st as well, the same night as the WWE Hall of Fame inductions. But on this week's Dynamite, coming up this Wednesday, the card is set. So this Wednesday, of course, the Orange Cassidy defends the newly rechristened, renamed International title. This was formerly known as the All Atlantic title. Orange Cassidy with Danhausen in his corner will be defending against Jeff Jarrett, who will have his entourage in his corner of Jay Lethal, Satnam Singh, and Sanjay Dutt. The World Trios titles will be defended in the first ever three-way match involving the trios titles as the champion, as having just won it recently at Revolution, the House of Black of Malachi Black, Brody King, and Buddy Matthews will take on the Elite of Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks, Matt and Nick Jackson, and the contingent from the Jericho Appreciation Society of Chris Jericho, Sammy Guevara, and Daniel Garcia. In another 6-man tag match, the Blackpool Combat Club, who have been being pushed as heels of late, at least 3 of the 4 members have been, of Claudio Castagnoli, the ROH World Champion Claudio Castagnoli, Pure Champion Wheeler Yuta, and 3-time AEW World Champion Jon Moxley teamed together to take on the Dark Order's Evil Una and a returning Stu Grayson, and of course Hangman Adam Page. With Jade Cargill is also set to defend the TBS title match against a mystery opponent. All this is happening at the Canada Life Center in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Also, as we've been talking about, of course. Oh, and one other thing too, AEW has announced that it is going to be doing house shows now. Prior to that, of course, the only time AEW would wrestle would be on TV or on YouTube through their programming through Dynamite and Rampage, and then the YouTube shows Dark Elevation and Dark, and now it was recently announced that they're going to be adding a third show to the roster that's reminiscent of the old WCW Saturday Night show from back in the day, called they've trademarked the name Collision. Now, going into the Ring of Honor news, of course, so thus far there are a couple matches that are signed for Supercard of Honor in a little under 3 weeks here. Mark Briscoe, of course, at Supercard of Honor will be surrendering. Right now he is still listed as as holding the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions with his late brother Jay. He'll be surrendering those titles at Supercard of Honor, and the titles will be put up in a Reach for the Sky ladder match. The first tag team participants already announced for that match are the Lucha Brothers of Penta El Miedo Zero and Rey Fenix. There are more tag teams to be announced for that match, or at least one more from what I saw. And then Mark Briscoe himself will be challenging Samoa Joe for the Ring of Honor television title. And also in some other news involving Impact Wrestling in New Japan, Impact Wrestling next pay-per-view will be Friday, March 24th, Sacrifice pay-per-view. Let me see what we have for that. Let's see what we have for that one. Of course, Impact will have Sacrifice on the 24th, and the following Thursday, the 30th, they'll be involved in a co-promotional event with New Japan, known as the Multiverse of Matches. So on the 24th, there from Windsor, Ontario, Canada, from St. Clair College in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. At Sacrifice, Mickie James is set to defend the Knockouts title against Jordynne Grace in Jordynne Grace's contractual rematch. Impact World Champion Josh Alexander will be teaming with Frank Kazarian and Rich Swann to take on the three-man team of Time Machine, comprised of Kushida, the Motor City Machine Guns, Chris Sabin, and Alex Shelley. As announced this last week's episode of Impact Wrestling on Access TV, Bully Ray and Tommy Dreamer will be battling each other in a busted open match. Now, while the details of that match have not been revealed yet, my guess would be, this is just my speculation, mind you, but busted open match is probably just a fancy way of saying a first blood match. Now, it could be something else entirely, but we'll just have to wait and see. And Trey Miguel is set to defend the X Division title at Sacrifice as well. And then coming up also at the multiverse event between Impact and New Japan, Josh already set to be happening there. A couple matches I know of that are already set to be going on there. Josh Alexander is set to defend the Impact World title against Kushida, a situation that was developed at the New Japan's Battle in the Valley event a few weeks ago. And also, Speedball, former multi-time X Division champion Speedball Mike Bailey will be taking on New Japan's Will Ospreay in that event as well. So that's pretty much what we have for you on the wrestling side of the news. So with that, let's go ahead and start winding things down a bit here, as we shall now start to close things out by taking a look back at this day in each history. So 8, 13, 1993. Alrighty then. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in each history. First off, I'm going to head back 30 years ago. As on this date 30 years ago today, the Sunrise produced movie Mobile. So on this date 30 years ago today, Mobile Suit SD Gundam Festival premiered in Japanese theaters on this date back in 1993. 30 years ago today, Sunrise Studios' Mobile Suit SD Gundam Festival premiered on this date back in 1993, 30 years ago today. So getting ready to move on to the next piece of niche history here. And we head forward to 2008. Let's see if they can. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that. Oh, actually, 2013. On this date in 2013, 2018. Okay, on this date in 2013, the 25th issue of Archie and Friends Double Digest went on sale on this date back in 2013. So 20 years, 10 years ago today, rather. 25th issue of Archie and Friends Double Digest went on sale on this date back in 2013, 10 years ago. So for $3.99, 160 pages. I'd say that's a pretty good price, even for back then. 160 pages, $3.99 as compared to today. Yeah, so, and 2013 is just so nice that we're gonna hit it twice. Is also on this date 10 years ago today was unfortunately the passing of American actor and voice actor Malachi Throne, passing away on this date 10 years ago today at the age of 84. Among his animated credits included God in Animaniacs, Monkey in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Of course, he really lent his voice to a number of DC series, including he was Ranakar in Green Lantern First Flight, Fingers in the Batman Beyond episode Speak No Evil, and the Judge in the Batman Judgment Day and the new Batman Adventures. So on this date, 10 years ago today, Malachi Throne passed away at the age of 84. And now, one last piece of niche history as we now head back just 5 years ago today. As on this date, 5 years ago today, WWE held its live SmackDown event from the Bankers Life Fieldhouse, Indianapolis, Indiana. On that date, in the main event, saw Carmella defeat Naomi. Also, Jinder Mahal defeat Bobby Roode on that date. The Bludgeon Brothers of the late Luke Harper, aka Brody Lee, and Rowan, who at the time were part of the Wyatt family, defeated Jimmy Uso and Big E via pinfall. AJ Styles defeated Rusev via DQ, who had Aiden English in his corner. Of course, Rusev now in AEW as Miro and Aiden English, and Impact as Matt Raywalt. So that's basically all that happened on SmackDown there 5 years ago today. So with that, guys, I thank everybody for being here. I thank you guys for the likes and the shares. Hope everybody enjoyed the content tonight. Let me see. Don't forget to come back here tomorrow for more niche news, and we'll be looking through even more articles running into comics, and maybe even Bleeding Fool. With that as well. And don't forget this Friday, of course, Terry from Mighty Geek Studios will be joining me as we'll be continuing our look through comics that went on sale in September 1939, focusing in on Centaur comics. So I hope to see everybody, and we'll be reading through features, including probably Speed Centaur, Amazing Man, maybe the Mass Marvel. We'll just wait and see which stories we actually pick out. So with that, I thank you guys for being here, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.